Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show, USA Panama Review Edition. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who will not be singing that Van Halen song in celebration. Hello, Taylor Rockwell.
Hello, no, I will not. No, not. I wish I knew another Van Halen song so that I could make a joke, and I maybe do, but no, nothing coming.
Maybe there's a lesser-known Van Halen song that's all about boring 1-1 draws, frustrating 1-1 draws with the Panamanian national team.
Nicaragua?
He would not be. It's called Los Canaleros 1-1.
Sí.
So yeah, once again we have a game against Panama.
I like that you went Spanish and then went into English.
I'm mixing it up. I'm trying to be bilingual.
Yes.
So once again, a tie with Panama.
Mm-hmm.
The game in March was a tie that was not too exciting.
Right.
So I'm starting to think maybe this whole Graham Zusi, Sanzusi game where he prevented Panama from having the chance to qualify for their first ever World Cup has cursed us.
So it's like basically we used all of our Panama karma in that game, and now we're just like slowly struggling to 1-1 draws.
Yep.
That's that seems accurate.
It's always going to be.
I like that explanation as opposed to the team just wasn't that well prepared and didn't execute the game plan.
Speaking of, this is our long take. You've had a quick take already, possibly. On this show, we are going to...
Sorry, I thought you said we've done our quick take, possibly? And I was like, what do you mean, possibly?
No,
we definitely did it. Yeah, then I realized.
Not so long ago.
But for a minute, I was like, wait, temporal... Like, what's happening here?
Wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey.
Exactly.
So we've since rewatched huge chunks of the game, as much as we could bear.
Yeah.
And we basically have a few things that we spotted, like the problems that we saw, what we think went wrong for the United States, what Panama did right. And we also have, speaking of time travel, we have some ideas about if we could go back to just before kickoff, maybe an hour before kickoff, what we would sort of do different. If we could like whisper in Bruce Arena's ear, hey, I'm from the future.
Yeah.
It finishes 1-1. Here's what you should do instead. We have some of those answers to give to Bruce, and then we're going to look ahead to Martinique, maybe.
Sure.
The Martinique team that is top of the group.
Yeah, they are.
Martinique, top of the group after a 2-0 win over Nicaragua.
Vive la Martinique?
Yeah. Vive la Martinique.
Yeah, sure.
Because they're French.
There you go.
So... I mean, from the top, like pick one thing that you think we saw that we think went wrong for the United States.
I mean, I think the biggest thing from the start was people backing off.
Yes.
And it seemed like in the first 3 minutes or so, the U.S., was, which is kind of sad, the U.S. was up for it. And you would see one of either Dax McCarty or Kellen Acosta stepping into the midfield or stepping into Panama's kind of defensive space and trying to put them under pressure and trying to force them into long balls or turning the ball over.
Yep.
As the game progressed, it seemed more so like the United States was content to drop off and have all their players drop deep and have 7 and 8 players behind the ball, which is kind of what we thought what Panama would do.
Yes.
And so you just kept seeing Panama have time on the ball in a way that we didn't think they would. And so even when you would see a U.S. player eventually step to one player, he would just play that ball laterally, and that next player would be wide open. And it just felt like the U.S. was sitting off so much that they could never really then get into a proactive approach.
Proactive's the word, right? Because when we saw the USA-Ghana game with a very similar team and we were so excited about the Dax McCarty, Kellen Acosta midfield with Joe Corona just ahead of them, they were going forward. Sorry, when even Ghana had the ball, the US was pushing forward, putting them under pressure. This time, like you said, Dax and Kellen Acosta going backwards. And then almost, I saw it quite a few times, Omar Gonzalez and Matt Beasley, the centre-backs, didn't really have anyone to mark because McCarty and Acosta were already doing it, which then leaves a load of space free in midfield. And poor Joe Corona trying to cut down all the angles, trying to cut down the passes to every single Panamanian player, which is not humanly, physically possible.
No, it's not. And especially then you have him running all over the place, but he's supposed to be that sort of creative link up in the middle that's supposed to connect the midfield to the attack and be part of the attack himself. But when he is running all over the place, trying to like limit people's opportunities and shut down space, then he's going to be tired and he's going to be out of position. So frequently you'd see him run over to try to cover a left back moving forward or a midfielder who'd slid out. And then all of a sudden when the U.S. would get the ball back, he would then have to run another 40 yards to get back into space. And so every single time it felt like it really kind of shut down the U.S.'s ability to get anything going because you then had these huge gaps between players.
And would you agree with me that like this wasn't a good game for Joe Corona, but almost it's not his fault? He was just put in an almost impossible situation.
Yeah, I think I definitely would. And I think that that's what I'm saying is like because a big part of his game is being a creative attacker, and if you never allow him to be in a situation where he can then execute that game plan, then it's never going to look too promising.
And I'd even argue on the defensive side, he wasn't given the chance to break up play as he did against Ghana because he's so far away from the other two midfielders because there's just too much space in between, and Panama were able to play through there.
Yeah, but it was, and you and I have played on these teams where it seems like everybody thinks if they mark their space, then they're doing their job. But just marking space doesn't get the job done, especially especially.
A lot of US defenders marking space.
Yeah, and so there was even one sequence where I remember Joe Corona had gone to the middle, and he had tried to put somebody under pressure. They played the ball out wide, and Kellen Rowe could step to that player, and instead he dropped into like the left channel as if to like, I'm marking out the left channel.
Right.
But Jorge Villafana was already doing that, and there was already somebody filling in behind, and it just felt like everybody was almost like thought they were playing against Germany or Brazil or somebody who was like, everybody could attack us at any moment, everybody's got to be in a defensive shape.
Right.
But then everyone's just standing off, and so Joe Corona then was like, okay, I guess I'll go put them under pressure. And now he runs 20 more yards to try to shut down something that somebody else could have stepped to easily.
And then isn't it one of those weird things where, as in some sort of depressing time travel movie, where by trying to prevent the thing that you know that you're scared of happening, you cause the thing to happen? Right?
Yeah.
So by being too scared of Panama and backing off, you allow them to come forward, and then they end up putting you into pressure, which you were trying to avoid to begin with.
I feel like that's more Greek tragedy style, where it's like you know your fate, and so you try to prevent your fate, but in so preventing it, you actually allow it to happen.
Yeah.
I think we're talking about Oedipus here.
Yes,
basically.
we are.
Yeah.
So is there a more positive spin on it? Like we told you the idea that maybe it was like a clever plan by Bruce Arena that maybe Panama were going to sit back, so then the US would combat that by also sitting back and trying to pull them forward and then counter them.
Did we talk about that on the quick take, or is that something we've since realized?
So the quick take was 15 minutes of recorded audio, but we've also talked like during the game at halftime between the quick take and this. So I don't know.
Well, I can't remember, so I'm going to talk about it again.
Let's do it.
I do think that is maybe what the United States ended up like their plan was to do after the first couple minutes. Because as I said, it did seem like they were up for it, and it was a little bit high intensity. But it did seem like maybe Arena was trying to like go at them quickly and then sit back and make Panama come out a little bit and get a little bit more stretched, and then you could hit them. But instead,
that's the optimistic version of it, right? That it was a plan, right?
Well, yeah, because I just can't imagine another scenario in which the United States have all of these players sitting back and covering space and covering just kind of like theoretical gaps, but not really doing anything to really put themselves in a position to win the ball back and then have aggressive, successful counterattacks. Yes, they had a few here and there, and a lot of that was dependent upon Dom Dwyer dropping way back, or Joe Corona coming back, sometimes coming back between the two center backs.
In fact, wasn't there a spell where 30th to 35th, like the US had two kind of half-decent chances, and it came from Dom Dwyer not being up with the defenders, but coming back almost to midfield, like in breaking up play or connecting play, like good little one-time balls, but it didn't happen often enough.
No, it didn't, and we talked about in the preview how we were excited to see what he would do if Panama were a little bit disorganized, and how he would be trying to make runs in behind and hanging on that last defender. And so then we're talking about him dropping in and trying to like help link up play. That's the opposite of what we were hoping to see him do. So it speaks to, again, the United States really struggling to get things going.
And again, it's him farther back than we expected him to be.
Yeah.
I have one possible theory about this, and I'm looking... I feel bad saying this, but maybe I'm looking at Omar Gonzalez.
Okay.
Because I feel like he likes to drop back a little bit and doesn't do a good job of sort of organising the defenders around him that then allows the other guys to step out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I looked at it a few times. I didn't see him talking. I saw opportunities for him to be like, hey, Graham, you mark him. And then Alejandro, you can push on a bit. And like Dax, you can push on. Don't worry. It seemed more like any organising was coming from Dax McCarty, because McCarty was almost on Omar Gonzalez's toes or on the centre-back's toes. You know what I mean? Because he was getting pulled into their orbit.
Yeah, and I want to say, like, stepping away from that for just 1 second, and then I want to go back to Omar.
Put a pin in it?
Well, you said, like we rewatched as much of this game as we could, and it really was the first time in a long time, if not ever, that I think you and I were both like, you'd say, like, all right, you want to fast forward a couple minutes? I'd be like, I guess. Like, it was just sort of, like, and because it wasn't...
A TSS lack of enthusiasm.
It wasn't
lack
of enthusiasm.
Right?
But that's the thing, is like, because we weren't angry. Like, we've been angry about stuff.
Yes.
We've been like, what is happening? Why are they doing this? This doesn't make sense.
Costa Rica 4, USA 0.
Yeah, like that was like legitimate like rage watch. This was just sort of like, gosh, they're still doing that.
Yeah.
Still doing that. And a big part of that, you're right, was Omar Gonzalez. And it was that he kept... That's what triggered that kind of random aside there for me, was that I remember looking at you at one point, you were being like, again? Like, because Omar Gonzalez routinely dropped a couple yards behind the rest of the defense or stepped a couple yards further forward than everybody else wanted to. And it just felt like he was kind of consistently in that mindset of like, I'm doing me. I need to prove that...
I'm doing me, yeah.
Yeah, that like I need to prove that I am like capable of starting in a World Cup. I need to like lock down and do everything. And once you start really focusing on your game, if you're part of a connected back four, then you're focused on everybody and making sure that this guy steps and this guy slides out and this guy fills in. But if you're focused on, I'm going to go try to win that ball, or I got to make sure my guy doesn't get open, then you're focusing on your responsibilities and not the kind of leader, veteran responsibilities.
So my, if I could go back in time, whispering Bruce's ear, I think I would be like, hey, Matt Hedges did well organising that defence against Ghana. Let's keep him starting for this game. And I haven't heard anything like he was injured or anything like that, so I'm assuming it was a selection decision, Omar Gonzalez over Matt Hedges.
Yeah? I'm assuming so, or maybe Arena just thought, like, I need a more veteran presence in there.
Experienced guy.
And a guy who maybe he thought... But see, again, I guess he knows Omar, so he knows what he's going to get out of him. But it just didn't feel like there was anybody in there who was really screaming. And that's what you kind of need at times.
Brad Gazan, the only one screaming, but also it was almost always after someone had a decent shot at him.
But there were just, true. But there were so many chances that Panama had, or half chances, or even just like semi-opportunities, where I think you, again, being the TSS resident center back, were just kept pointing out how nobody was getting on anybody. Nobody was saying, like, you got to go, you got to go. Like, a couple times Villafana would try to direct some people, but generally speaking, it felt like everybody was just sort of like scared to do anything wrong, and so everybody was just sort of sitting back, not really focused on what everybody else needed to do, and so you didn't have that sort of cohesive team play. It was a lot of individuals stepping and running and trying to cover.
You know what's interesting? We're thinking about the what we heard just before the Panama goal was Bruce Arena, we think, or someone from the coaching staff, I think it was Bruce Arena, yelling at Kellen Rowe, telling him to follow a guy, telling him that's your man, stay with him, right?
He's yours,
I thought that was kind of odd, because those are the sorts of things that should be players yelling that on the field. Do you get what I'm saying? That felt, to me, very...
that was weird for a number of reasons, but go ahead.
The main thing I'm thinking is that's very under 10s, where you have to... some coaches say you don't need to tell the players what to do, you need them to figure it out, but if they can't, then you have to tell them, follow that person, mark that person.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
But I do. But it was also strange to me because the man we're talking about is Barcenas, the kind of right midfielder, right winger for Panama. And that was because Jorge Villafana, the left back, was marking Panama's left back, and he was pushed right back. So he was pushed further up than Kellen Rowe.
Like Murillo, the new Red Bulls guy.
And I think that's why Kellen Rowe was sort of like, well, shouldn't I be the one stepping? Like, why am I suddenly like a third center back here?
He was trying to get back in the correct spot, but he ended up playing left centre back weirdly for him.
Yeah, and so and then I think he ends up getting in the right position. Like, he is then goal side of Murillo. He is where he needs to be when that ball comes in. But I think this is in the lead up to the goal, and I think you spotted this. It's that then he still has those sort of aggressive, more attack-minded instincts of I'm going to step across and win this ball.
He tries to step in front,
And that's why he then is subject to that turn, and then he has to make up for it by doing the slide tackle, and then he gets butt-megged.
So, we watched this a few times to figure out, I think we asked this in the quick take, how does Barcenas get that ball like under or around or over or whatever Rowe when Rowe does that ill-advised slide tackle?
And I thought, in the quick take, hot take, I thought it was that he had like seen the slide tackle coming and did that little kind of like cheeky lift over the top, and then he went around. Nope,
he went
that is not what happened.
As Rowe came sliding in and put it under Rowe's butt, therefore butt-megged.
I'm not even sure he meant to, but it still counts. Even if I don't mean to put the ball between your legs, if it goes between there, I have nutmegged you. And in this situation, I think he doesn't really see Rowe coming. I think he's taking a touch, and then that touch is kind of fortuitous in that it's in front of him, him being Barcenas. As Rowe comes in, it just goes under Rowe, and then Barcenas lashes onto it on the other side.
So we've sort of wandered into talking about Panama's equalising goal, which I think is fine, right? Because if you listen to this show, you already know the narrative of the game, which is US score first, Dwyer, Panama equalise. And I think this is kind of germane to talk about here, because it's a lot about sort of defensive disorganisation. And we're not putting it all on Omar Gonzalez, but he's definitely part of the problem. And I think all of that spread everywhere for the build-up to this goal, for what happens when the ball comes into the box, for what happens after Brad Guzan turns out, chests it back down. Everything is defensive disorganisation.
Yes, but also defensive disorganization that did not need to be disorganized.
Yes.
And I know disorganization never needs to be disorganized if you're organized, but in this situation, again, going back to the quick take episode, my speculation, because you were wondering, like, why are no center backs involved in this? How did they not step across or make a play?
So they were present, but they weren't making any plays.
Right, and my speculation was that, I'm going to guess they thought Rowe was going to win that ball, then suddenly Barcenas was in, and then they had to sprint back. The reality is that when Barcenas gets past Rowe and then picks his head up for that cross, they're all in the right position.
Yeah.
Like, Beasler is where he needs to be. Omar Gonzalez.
So Beasler is like at the edge of the 6-yard box in a way that cuts out the low ball or any ball that is going to go across the face of the 6-yard box. Perfect.
So is Omar Gonzalez, Graham Zusi the same at the back post. They've all covered the space that they need to cover. If they don't move, nothing will happen.
Yeah.
It's either going to be a driven ball that Brad Guzan will collect, probably cleanly, or it will be a ball to one of them and they'll do their best to get it clear.
Yeah.
But instead...
Arroyo is in there, but I think Gonzalez basically has him marked.
He does, but then what happens is Beasler kind of aggressively goes to step to Barcenas. Gonzalez tries to close down Arroyo a little bit and just takes a couple steps out. And Zusi, I think, tries to cover the back post a little bit. And so instead of like staying in the proper spots, they vacate those spots. And now there is a channel for that ball to come in. And that's exactly where Barcenas plays
Panama Canal-sized channel.
Yeah, and then again, like I know...
The US did create the canal, right? So maybe it's almost the same thing.
Yeah, I was so busy.
A massive channel.
I was so busy getting ready to be frustrated with Graham Zusi that I didn't catch your excellent pun. So I apologize. Well done, sir.
So we create like a corridor of uncertainty, as they call it. It's a canal of uncertainty across the top of the US 6-yard box.
Indeed. But again, this is where we talk about players maybe not being quite as confident in their positions. And so it's Kellen Rowe maybe not quite knowing how to make that strong defensive slide tackle. Like maybe that's a slide tackle that works when you're trying to like stop a counterattack or win the ball back offensively, as Dom Dwyer did.
And he was also in desperation because he sort of got beat by that move where he tried to step, realised very quickly this is the wrong move. Barcenas is in behind me, I've got to catch this up. And maybe he thought a big dramatic slide tackle would almost like even out the narrative.
But then, but then that doesn't work. And then Graham Zusi, like he sees, I think it's Torres who comes in to shoot the ball the first time. He like looks and sees Torres coming and then looks back and then is like, oh no, I better go.
Comedy double.
He really
watch
did.
This in slow motion, it's great comic timing from Graham Zusi. It's just not great defensive timing.
Yeah, exactly. And so and then he goes, but by the time Graham Zusi starts to get to that ball to try to clear it, Torres is already full head of steam charging towards that ball. He's always going to win it. Now it is a credit to Graham Zusi that he then pops back up off of the Guzan chest inadvertent save, I'm going to call that one, and tries to do something. It's better than say Omar Gonzalez does, who covers 2 yards in about the entire sequence, whereas Matt Beasler and Graham Zusi cover well more than that.
I remember on the replay, Landon Donovan says Kellen Acosta's like gone to sleep or fallen asleep there because he's not quick enough to prevent. Is it Camargo in the end gets to the ball, takes a couple of touches and shoots? Is that fair as well?
I mean, it's tough because if you go back and watch this sequence a bunch of times, as we did, we watched it. I feel like sometimes I opt for the same numbers, so it's usually like 40 or 700 for some reason. And I'm going to say this time we watched it 150 times, but we watched this one a lot. And I would just say that nobody is like Kellen Rowe maybe is the most at fault for that slide tackle, but again, I feel like there's other factors at play that lead to him having to make that play.
This defensive positional organisation that puts him in that spot, marking their right winger in that space to begin with.
And so then when there is that kind of scrum where there are like 7 or 8 U.S. players in there and it ends up being Camargo finishing, like yes, Acosta is slow to step, but so is Omar Gonzalez. Matt Beasler does okay. Graham Zusi is slow to get to Torres in the first place. And so it feels like a lot of people are slow, but it's also like I don't think I would go so far as to say like, oh, Kellen Acosta just totally lost his man.
I would almost use the phrase, I think I use this maybe too much, but diffusion of responsibility.
Yeah.
Because when that ball does pop to Camargo, there's Acosta, there's Zusi has popped up to try and get there. Gonzalez is also in there, and Beasler isn't too far away. So it's almost that thing of like, we're all here, one of us will tackle him. I don't want to be the one that like gets in the way of my teammate, but it means that no one fully commits to it.
And
do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and then like...
But that's defensive disorganization, because if it's obvious whose man that is, then it's your job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, or even just like, and maybe this isn't quite what you're saying, but I think that leads to another point for me, which is like sometimes you need the jerk. Like you need the guy who's like, my ball, and comes through and clears it, and like doesn't hesitate to knock you out of the way to win that ball. Because it's like, look, man, my job is to keep a clean sheet, and I'm going to do that whatever I need to do. And sometimes it's obnoxious, but sometimes you need that person to come through and just like knock people off the ball and win that challenge. And if everybody is sort of like, well, I think it's mine, but it might not be mine, but I'm going to kind of step and I'm going to try to keep my space. If you're trying to do, it's the Ron Swanson line of like do one thing well, don't half-ass 2 things.
Yes.
That's what it is. It's like, don't try to keep your spacing, but also try to step to the guy. It's not going to work. You got to do one or the other.
And wasn't this a problem throughout the game?
Yeah.
There were a lot of sort of things where like it was Zusi and Gonzalez in the first half. Do you remember this? Where like Zusi sort of misjudges a high ball, but then he like backs into the guy trying to hold him off. Omar Gonzalez comes to step, and he doesn't want to. He definitely in that thing I'm talking about, I think it's like the 20th minute or so, Gonzalez could have knocked both the guys out of the way, including Zusi, and headed that ball clear, but instead he lets it bounce, and Zusi's like letting it bounce in front of him. And I feel like that was very much a feature of the US for almost the entire game, except for like the odd 5-minute spell here and there, is that they're very sort of reactive and like scared of stepping on each other, and it like that's definitely about the sort of backing off.
No,
thing,
absolutely.
Right?
And in that sequence, I think they're bailed out by a foul. The referee calls for a foul there. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, Panama had a very good opportunity there. And even I would say at the very end of the first half, you see another one where there's a long ball over the top. And Alejandro Bedoya, I'm not sure if it's because he doesn't know there's a guy there or he thinks it's his best play that he can make. He tries to do this like kind of like overhead, like it's like basically he's tracking the ball over his shoulder and tries to like kick it clear while running away from the ball, sort of. And so he doesn't make good contact. Then Panama have a good chance because then it's 1v1. I forget who the attacker is, but it's him. It's probably Camargo again, but it's him and Zusi. And Zusi, I think, again, doesn't want to get beat, but doesn't want to step too aggressively.
Show him inside, sort of, but shows him inside an at goal.
It shows him, but doesn't even really. He kind of stands like 4 or 5 yards away and tries to like square him up. And again, that feels like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. I'm like stopping a counterattack. But if you're stopping a counterattack 18 yards out by letting him cut inside and shoot, then you're not really stopping a counterattack. And so again, it just felt like, the diffusion of responsibility. Like, I'm not going to be the one to step and get beat, but I'm not going to be the one to sit back and let him shoot like cleanly. So I'm going to kind of do both and hope it works out.
So in general, we would say just everybody push a little farther forward. You can put more pressure on them higher up the field, and then just each like individual person takes like 100% personal responsibility for their space. And again, I would say if Matt Hedges is in there, I really think he is a guy that is sort of organising the people around him and sort of making sure that happens. That offside line was so straight against Ghana and so ragged many times in this game.
See, I was going to say I wouldn't disagree with you, but I would say I don't know Matt Hedges well enough to know if he is that guy who's going to step in and organize.
He has a reputation for talking and organizing.
Except I just remember there was the sequence, I think it was in the Ghana game, where it was a Ghanaian player went down with injury, USA players go over and get water, and you remember everybody talking, and Hedges kind of comes in out of nowhere, it's like this. And so you're right, that he is definitely a person who's going to come in and let you know. And I just couldn't get over how often U.S. players didn't do that. How you wouldn't see a center back say like, "Hey, cover me," or a center back would step, or a center midfielder would step, and then like try to tell somebody there was a man there. And I mean, routinely, again, I know we're harping on him a lot, but it's the one that comes most readily to mind. Like on three different occasions, Omar Gonzalez would be marking a midfielder. That midfielder would drop into like right behind Dax McCarty, and Omar would just be like, "All right, he's near Dax now. It's not my responsibility." But he wouldn't tell anybody. He wouldn't tell Dax McCarty or Kellen Acosta. So now there's this guy who's open behind one of your midfielders who don't know he's there. So then he's going to receive the ball in space. They're going to have to turn and try to step to him. But then the player that they were theoretically marking has now run through, and it just feels like, again, that lack of communication. Even if you feel like you're doing your individual job and you're the one who's like doing your role, you're not helping anybody else out, and it leads to the whole team really struggling.
All right, can I have a final word on this, which is that I think people listening to this will be like, no, but Omar played really well, because there were a lot of things where he had great defensive cover in the end, right? He would get the right side of his guy. I think he kind of got that block on Diaz in the end.
He did.
Do you remember after that cross came in and there was a Guzan reaction save, and then Diaz basically had the whole goal, and I think Gonzalez gets in front of it. They don't get a corner kick, but he does get a block. So he had a lot of good individual defensive plays, and but not good organizational stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was going to say the other big one that people will probably remember is Kellen Acosta gets dispossessed in the 21st minute. He's trying to do like a kind of 1-2 with Dax McCarty, but he's a little bit too slow, gets the ball poked away. Panama are on a very good counterattack. Omar Gonzalez gets really good positioning, gets a little bit of body to the player, kind of knocks him over, but does so very cleanly. USA collect the ball. It's good defensive work from Omar Gonzalez.
Yes.
But again, it's good individual work, not teamwork.
All right, so lots more to talk about, including Dwyer's goal, the possible penalty kick on Bedoya, which we've taken a few more looks at, what Panama were doing, because Bruce Arena pointed that out. But before we get to that, we should let you know that today's show is sponsored by X1 Fuel. X1 Fuel, they've been a sponsor for a good while now.
They have.
They are pre- and post-workout supplement. It's a shake. You put the powder in the special X1 shaker. You shake it up with the like spring type thing in there, right? That's kind of cool.
I think that's the thing that like makes it turn from like liquid with chunks of powder. Because I don't know if you've ever had that before. If you make like Nestle Quick and you like stir and stir and stir and stir, and then you go to drink and it's like poof, like pop of like dry sand that destroys everything. The spring, I think, keeps it a little bit more like viscous, milkshakey versus dry death.
So the pre-workout formula ends up being kind of like a delicious strawberry milkshake, but it's packed with all kinds of protein and acai berries and all goji berries, I believe, all kinds of sort sort of very natural ingredients in powder form, so it's not full of chemicals and caffeine and sugar. It's not one of those things.
And if you're not a fancy pants millionaire with the cold water dispenser on your refrigerator, what I've learned is if you put a couple ice cubes in there in the shaker, then you shake it up. That actually gives it an even colder consistency that is a little bit more like a milkshake.
Very nice.
There you are.
All right, so when you drank this before we played soccer, you said it kept you a little more focused, made you a little more enthusiastic. So,
can I add one more thing to that too? I've been doing a lot of manual labor around my house because, again, I'm trying to do all of the housework myself, which if you buy a home, word of advice, don't do that. But so I've actually done it there too when I knew, like, there was one day where I spent the entire day hauling bricks. Yeah. And I was like, why, hello, X1 ignition. You are going to keep me energized for this activity.
It wasn't designed for that. It was designed for student athletes. But I guess you could call it a workout, right? A hauling bricks workout.
Yep.
Right?
I looked at
your home gym.
I looked at the temperature. It was like 93 degrees with like 52% humidity or something. And I was like, yep, gonna need some help. Gonna need some help.
So if we could have maybe asked a US player for this game to have maybe had the ignition shake before this game to improve their sort of alertness and their performance, get some extra nutrients in their body, which player would you have given it to?
I think I'm going to go with one of two people. I'm either going to go with Dax McCarty because it just didn't seem like he was showing, especially as the game progressed, he wasn't like really showing and stepping to the ball or like putting himself in a position where he could pick the ball up off a center back and turn. It felt like a lot of times you'd see him standing maybe 10 yards further downfield than he needed to be. Yeah. And then the other one I would say would be Alejandro Bedoya. Because he ran. He definitely ran. I think there was a couple instances in which we were both like, oh, he's faster than we thought he was. Yeah. But you also had some moments where because of that like physical exertion, he then was a little bit sloppy in his passing or he would play a ball out of bounds. Yeah. And so I think maybe a little bit more ignition formula keeps him a little bit sharper.
I would say maybe Kellen Acosta, because it seemed like Kellen Acosta below peak Kellen Acosta today.
That's a better shot.
So maybe he just needed an extra boost.
No, and I think you're right because it I felt like when I took it and then played soccer, it helped me just be a little bit sharper and keep that mental edge. And I think you're absolutely right though that we did see Kellen Acosta just like a half step slower consistently, and that's why I think 3 or 4 times he just got the ball poked away because he was just taking one extra touch.
More on him later. So the recovery shake, you make that up afterwards, and it sort of helps you. It has a little bit of sugar in it, I believe. I was looking at the carbohydrates. It helps you sort of restore afterwards. That's what it's called, the recovery shake. Who deserved that?
I mean, I'm going to say Dom Dwyer.
Yes.
Because he worked...
A lot of thankless running?
A lot of thankless running. There was the one sequence, I don't think I wrote down the minute, but there was the one where he runs a good 40 yards. Here it is. It was the 48th minute. He runs like 40 yards downfield to chase down just a long ball. Then he runs around the player and slide tackles, and it's a good slide tackle and wins the ball. And then I think he has the same thing where he gets up and is kind of gassed at that point so that he takes a sloppy touch when he gets the ball back. But just there was lots of running like that from Dom Dwyer, and then there was smart running like for his goal.
Excellent. Oh, we'll get to the goal in a second. And my pick, I think, actually Dom Dwyer is a good pick, but I would also go Joe Corona because he did a lot of sort of short bursts, trying to close down the angles like we talked about earlier, but for no reward. So at least the one reward he could have is the post-workout recovery shake from X1 Fuel. And
can our listeners have any sort of reward, Daryl Grove?
They can. They can get $10 off any X1 Fuel product at x1fuel.com. That's Beautiful. The website. I'll put a link in the show notes, of course. If you use the discount code Total Soccer, all one word, all uppercase, you'll get $10 off any order that you place at x1fuel.com. Thank you to X1 Fuel for sponsoring today's show.
Indeed, and thank you for reminding me that you were editing tonight, so I need to promise a whole lot more stuff in the show notes.
I'll give you 2. I will put 2 more links at your suggestion.
I think I won't be able to think of anything else. Maybe Martinique's goals, so people can get a little more familiar with their attacking prowess.
Actually, that second goal was not too shabby.
It had some good moments and some bad moments.
Yeah.
But yeah, so to get back to this game, I think you left off with a point that I did want to get to, which is that we've talked... Panama. In that we've talked a lot about what the United States did wrong, and I think when you go down that road, it's easy to not look at what Panama did right and to really frustrate the United States.
So that's what I was getting. Actually, Bruce Arena said, give Panama credit. Yeah. They did a lot of things well tonight, especially in central midfield.
Yeah,
so
and I think
what's he talking about?
I think what he is talking about is the fact that you would see one of Panama's front two, usually it was Diaz, I believe, dropping in and man-marking Dax McCarty.
Yes.
Anytime, and not always, like it wasn't like he would track him all the way down the field, but it was usually when one of the two center backs or one of the two fullbacks would have the ball, McCarty would be trying to show because he would be trying to get the ball and either...
He's the Michael Bradley.
Yeah, and either... But I think what we saw him do against Ghana is what he was trying to do tonight, which is either quickly switch the point of attack. So if that ball is coming from Zusi, he'll take a touch and then ping it out wide to Villafania, and then it's on. Or he would try to do that kind of reverse pass into the feet of Kellen Acosta and peel out, and now they're away. And it seemed like Diaz's job was to make sure that that quick little link up didn't happen.
So yeah, he either like just blocked off the pass from the centre backs or from fullbacks to McCarty altogether by just really man marking him tight. Or at least when McCarty did receive the ball, Diaz was on him, so that he really didn't have time to like really pick out the pass he really wanted and get something going. In some ways, I think you saw... so there's a lot of all-action plays from McCarty, and that's why I was kind of excited first time I watched it. Second time I watched it, I think you sort of saw the limitations maybe of Dax McCarty in that he can't do that under pressure.
Right.
And the reason I'm saying this is, I know this is not fair, but Luka Modric, Tony Kroos, those like real like top-level, best-in-the-world guys, they can do it under pressure.
Yeah.
Right? They can find that pass even with someone bearing down on them.
Yeah, and again, we talked about this in the quick take, but there's that sequence that ends with him like cutting out a really good cross that would have been like a certain goal. But that sequence starts with him making like basically having a sloppy first touch. Then I think because he's a little bit unnerved by that first touch, he tries to like really ping a ball down the left-hand side to Villafania. That ball gets cut out and it goes back to McCarty. And then this is the difference, I think. I think if it is Michael Bradley, I think he calms it down and then drops it all the way back to Brad Guzan, or just kind of settles things down a little bit and makes a smarter pass.
I hadn't thought about this midfield performance in relation to the Michael Bradley discussion we had in the build-up to this game about, like, is there like some element of his place being under threat because of that Dax Acosta performance against Ghana?
And I don't know who would have claimed that maybe he was a little bit nervous, but whoever they were, they might have been me. They should maybe admit that they were a little bit wrong. Just because, again, I really do like Dax McCarty.
Me too,
I still think
same.
he is a very good option for the U.S. coming off the bench if you have like your full contingent of players. But just this point that when that ball comes back to him, if that is Michael Bradley, I think he sees it as like, okay, I've messed up twice. I'm going to calm it down. I'm going to play a smart pass. And McCarty panics and gets dispossessed. And then that's what leads to that counterattack. Now, it's to his credit that he then sprints back, gets it in position to cut that ball out. But he does that because he made 3 mistakes in a row. So I feel like 3 mistakes aren't made up for by one good defensive play.
Yeah, and whatever Bradley does wrong, panic is not one of them. Right? I mean, see that chip against Mexico for some non-panic. Okay, so back to Panama. It is a very... So we didn't fully mention this, right? Diaz is a forward, right? But what he's done... So they technically played a 4-4-2. And I was thinking, how are we not dominating midfield? Because we've got McCarty, Acosta, and Joe Corona. That's what Panama did, is they had Diaz drop in and form a 3-man midfield when needed, or Torres would come and do it if needed.
Or, on top of that, Barcenas and Camargo would come inside too. And then you'd have almost like 5 in a very condensed space. So they could either like ping the ball around or clog up the midfield, so the U.S. had to go wide. And it seemed like Panama sort of had seen some footage and maybe thought, yeah, sure, go ahead and cross. We'll see how that works out for you. But the other important part of having those...
I'm laughing because it's terrible.
But the other point of having those numbers in the middle is that, again, to go back to like the very first thing we were talking about, is that then, so say they would send 3 of those 5 like now more central players forward, they still have 2 back. And so again, if it's those 3 go forward, well, now you're going to have McCarty and Acosta dropping off. You're going to have one of the center backs stepping. But there's still going to be a huge gap, and now it's still Corona running back and forth between 2 guys, and they can 1-2 around him, and then he's going to be frustrated, or he's going to be like, well, I've just run 30 yards, and now I'm kind of out of breath, and now you have 2 people beyond him, and suddenly you still have numerical superiority for Panama.
So what could the U.S. have done differently?
I mean, I think they could have either brought more players into the middle themselves, and I think that's what maybe they were trying to do with Dom Dwyer dropping in a little bit more.
Or get Bedoya and Rowe to come more central.
But I think the other thing they could have done, which is something that you spotted, is what they did in the second half, which is be more aggressive getting the ball forward. You had the fullbacks really pushing on to start that second half, and I think that's why the goal comes.
Before we talk about Dom Dwyer's goal, I want to focus a little more on Kellen Acosta and why he possibly underperformed. Because one idea I had, we talked about Dax McCarty being cut off by Diaz, right? To me, the great thing against Ghana is that they were both options, right? Acosta was taking them off the centre-backs, McCarty was taking them off the centre-backs. Against Panama, when McCarty was cut out, it seemed to me Kellen Acosta was not coming and showing. He was like drifting into other spaces instead.
Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, you're absolutely right, and I forgot about this point, that it seemed like he had been tasked with like running into the kind of left channel, as if like to maybe combine with Villafaña, or maybe look for like a 40-yard ball on the ground that he could then lay off.
I think it was like Kellen Rowe was supposed to come inside a little bit and get more central, and then Acosta was supposed to drift out left. But when that wasn't working, I don't know if this is Acosta's fault or Bruce Arena's fault. They needed Acosta to just come back and be like an extra Dax McCarty. Be the other option. If Dax McCarty's marked up by Diaz, make sure Acosta can show, and then you would have had Panama chasing the US around. And the ironic thing is, when the US was defending, Acosta was too far back and alongside McCarty. But when we got the ball, Acosta and McCarty they were too far away. They had it the exact wrong way around.
And now I'm sad.
Sad sigh.
Yeah.
So is this just... So my suggestion is maybe this is Acosta's immaturity, because he's only 21 still, right? And he's not been sort of playing for all that long. He's not been playing international soccer regularly for very long at all, right? He used to have those weird appearances at left back under Klinsmann.
Yeah.
So even though we were super high on him and super excited for a good long while... this was maybe the first glimpse of how he's not fully ready to be to put all our hopes and dreams on top of Kellen Acosta.
Yeah, I think that's
fair. Which is fair, but also disappointing to see the limits.
Yeah, I think the drag racers outside with you agree. If you can hear that on the mic, I'm guessing you might be able to.
I think you might not, because of how good our studio is. We'll see.
Let's hope so.
Let us know via Twitter.
But yeah, I think you're right. That I think it just, again, I think the overall performance I would go with was disjointed, or what was your term for like not playing together? I can't remember, but
disorganized.
Maybe that was it. I can't remember, but yes, it was something like that. But I think that was it. It's like you didn't see, because even that run from Acosta, it was more of a drift into like that left channel. It wasn't sort of like I need to make this run and then check back.
A lot of drifting runs, just hoping maybe there's some space over here, as opposed to like direct, targeted, aggressive. Like, hey, this is it,
and not like the Tokyo drifting, but like just slow, lethargic drifting.
Shall we talk Dom Dwyer's goal?
Yeah.
Shall we talk Kellen Rowe's moves that he put on down that left wing?
Sure. Still not sure how much of it he meant, but yeah.
Actually, before we get to that, you attempted to segue earlier, before we remembered the Kellen Acosta stuff, about how the fullbacks were pushed high.
Yeah.
The build-up to Dom Dwyer's goal is Graham Zusi right back, getting forward. This is in the first 5 minutes of the second half, so I think Bruce Arena has said, hey, Zusi, hey, Jorge, get forward. Graham and Jorge, get forward. Get involved in the attack. Yep. There's a Zusi cross, which isn't a bad cross, right? I think it ends up getting headed clear. And then after that ball pops loose, I think Villafaña is up there and pressures Panama and wins the throw-in. So it's right back in left back, way, way up the field. And then Villafaña takes a quick throw to Kellen Rowe down the line, and away we go.
Sort of. First, there's a little Kellen Rowe, like, I'm going to flick it up in the air and then maybe try to head it past you, but then recognizes that that's not going to work. And then it's a very, very silky, not first touch, but touch with the right instep that, like, he takes it out of the air and takes it in the direction he wants to go. And just because he is so, like, kind of determined and decisive in that touch in the direction that he's going, he creates a little bit of separation, and that's why he's then able to put that ball into the box.
So what I saw is he tries to lift it over the heads of two defenders, and I think he was going to burst through the middle.
I think outside of the right foot, right?
But I think it just touches the brow of the defender.
You're right.
I
keep saying that he heads it, but he doesn't, does he?
It's so I don't know which defender it is, but it just obviously kills the momentum of the ball. But then Rowe is able to like react quickly and think quickly and sort of essentially drag the ball back towards him and then get around the outside and then get that nice left-footed cross in, all with three touches, right? Right foot up, right foot drag it back, left foot bend it in, fire it in.
But I'd say like drag it back implies that he's like pulled it back and then like stayed where he was. But I would say it's almost like a sweep. Like he brings that right foot across and like takes it away with him so that he can go down to the end line and then play the ball in.
It's good stuff
it
from
is.
Kellen Rowe. Yeah, I was really impressed. I kind of wish maybe he'd got to play on the right wing the whole game because, a lot of that skill is with his right foot. But then the left-footed cross.
Yeah, I kind of wish he also hadn't been audibly screamed at by the manager moments before he made a bad play that led to a goal.
Yeah.
Because that might be one of those things where we remember the crafty play that led to the U.S.'s goal, and his manager remembers that he kind of didn't want to mark the guy, had to be screamed at to do it, and even when he was marking him, didn't do that great of a job. Yeah.
Great ball in for Dom Dwyer, though.
Yeah. Wait, is it a great ball now? You weren't sure on the quick take.
Yes, I'm sure now. I thought maybe that he'd actually hit the first defender with it, and then the first defender had kind of bumbled it. But actually, it's like out of the first defender's reach, and the first defender only nearly gets there as sort of a heroic lunge.
Yep.
So that, to me, that makes it a good ball. And then Dom Dwyer, I love on their broadcast, the Fox Sports, the main Fox broadcast. Yep. They have a close-up of his movement alongside the defender and what he does, right? Which wasn't anything stunning. It was more like maybe lean into him, then push away from him, basically. But I think it's really good TV to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Stu Holden was on that about the kind of creating a little bit of separation to then by the time to shoot. The thing that I think you noted was that he never looks at the goal. So he knows where he is in relation to the goal, and he knows where he's trying to put that ball. I doubt he's trying to, like, ting it off the post, but I think he is very keenly aware that the goalkeeper is covering, like, near middle of the goal. Yeah. So you got to put it far post if you want it to go in.
And it is great that you can find the most far post you can get, right? He hits the inside of the far post without looking, I think through the defender's legs as well. Yeah.
And I want to say that is a goal that is born of confidence. That it is sort of like, I back myself, because it is a very difficult, it's like you have to hit it, the ball's coming in and you have to hit it like the opposite side to send it the reverse direction, if that makes any sense. And like, it takes...
If you try to figure out the geometry and write it down on paper, it would be very complicated.
And with that in mind, if you really try to overthink this and be like, okay, in order to do this, I have to turn my hips this way, and you can do that. You can think about it a little bit too much, and then you end up skying it or whiffing it. It's just his sort of like, this is where it needs to be, and then does it. That speaks to him having confidence in his ability, which is a very good thing for a U.S. forward to have.
It's a little worrying to me that he looks like the US's most dangerous player by a distance. Only 2 caps in.
Yeah,
that's a bit of a concern.
I mean, the striker is usually going to look to be the most dangerous player.
Okay, that's true. Speaking of, so we've done the narrative a little backwards here. Obviously, everybody who watches knows that Panama scored 10 minutes after Dom Dwyer's goal. It is 10 minutes of Panamanian chances. Right? It's Panamania.
And I think, first of all, again, well done. Second of all, I think you, again, pointed out that after the U.S. fullbacks were getting forward a bit more aggressively, they start to sit back a little bit more now that the United States is up 1-0.
The whole team starts to just go back into that dropping off mode, and I think that's a huge mistake.
It is, because it invites Panama to come at you. And it would be different if Panama had been sitting back and heroically defending and trying to get that 0-0 draw. But they had been going at the United States a little bit more, or a lot bit more. And they had been, I think, the more aggressive of the two teams, certainly in the first half. And so then if you're the United States, if you then take the kind of foot off the gas and go to the brakes and go a little bit more defensive, and you're like, haha, come at us now. You have been doing that all game. This could be bad. And it was. It was 5 or 10 minutes of Panama getting really good chances and the USA kind of reeling and trying to struggle to get their heads right.
Yep. Okay, and then we tried to turn it back around after this, right? I think the Juan Agudelo sub was planned from about the 55th minute onwards, right? So I'm sure Bruce Arena saw something was up and started that substitution happening, but then I'm pretty sure Panama score before they can even get the numbers up to get Agudelo on the field. Right. So we end up, the first sub is Agudelo for Joe Corona. It doesn't really change the game, right? And neither does bringing in Jassy Zardes or, in the end, Jordan Morris for Alejandro Bedoya. And it really felt a little bit, I think this is maybe unkind, but it felt like Bruce Arena was just throwing forwards on the field and seeing what would happen.
Yeah, I mean,
really,
to some extent.
The midfield was broken, and maybe you should have switched up that McCarthy Acosta thing. Maybe this was Christian Roldan's game.
And I keep giving you credit for everything. I promise listeners that I thought of some things, but we talked about but what else could he do? Because he doesn't really have another number 10. The only other one he has is maybe Kellen Rowe, who's already played a whole game. So you can't really move him inside. And I think your point was maybe this is why Kenny Saif was initially in that roster.
Yes, and he was So Kenny Saif got injured and was replaced with Chris Pontius, who it seems Bruce Arena was not thrilled to throw into this game.
Yeah, I think he just came in on, the 5th? Yeah. Or maybe the 6th is when he probably got into camp.
But on the flip side, I could imagine, this isn't Bruce Arena's fault, but I can imagine Kenny Saif being a guy that you bring in and sort of put some life into the attack. Just based on what we saw about him running people down in the first, in the bits we saw of him in the Ghana game, he would have done some more of that sort of hard work, hassling people kind of thing.
Yeah, and even, especially because for Kenny Saif, we talked about when he left this squad, that it's a huge blow to him, not just because it's an injury and he's missing out on this tournament, because this was an opportunity to really show that he deserves consideration for the World Cup if the United States qualify, or when the United States qualifies more appropriately. So that, I think if he had been in this game, you probably have just like maybe 5 or 10% more effort because he is so desperate to show that he should get continued looks.
So what I would have liked, I know this wasn't possible because I don't think he was on the original 40, is to have the option of someone like
Benny Feilhaber?
Yes. Benny Feilhaber coming into this game, or Sasha Kljestan maybe, a replacement number 10 for Joe Corona, who himself is not really number 10, right? When he plays for Tijuana, as I understand it, he's more of a number 8. Like, it would be nice to have a pure creator, even if you're not going to start him, even if you don't plan to play him. Sometimes it's the game that calls out for that, and I think this was that game. Because in the end, all we did was send on basically a bunch of strikers who ended up playing wide, right? Zardes, Morris, Agudelo. None of them were in their correct positions. Everyone's in their second choice position.
So do we think then that like Arena had that 40-man provisional roster and then told like Christian Pulisic, like, no, you deserve some time off. Go do your preseason with Dortmund. We're not going to ask you, to play in this tournament. And now do we think there's going to be a sheepish phone call like, hey, so we kind of need a number 10. Just wondering what you're up to. Give us a call back. Bye.
I think the way it actually works is
just Bruce Arena text, hey, you up?
You up? Pulisic's like, yeah, I'm 6 hours ahead. It's like 8 a.m.
New phone, who dis? That's definitely how he responds to that.
I actually think at US Soccer headquarters, they have a big like Batman type sign, and they go up on the roof and they pull the switch, Commissioner Gordon Starr, and it just flashes up a big number 10 in the sky.
Glad to see that we're all keeping our heads on our shoulders when it comes to Christian Pulisic.
I'm just saying he's going to save us all.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
I mean, he could have rescued this game.
Yeah, right? he could probably have beaten up Superman without the giant mechanized batsuit. That's what I'm saying.
All right, anything else that Bruce Arena could have done differently?
Aside from calling Christian Pulisic with the bat signal, or the Pulisic signal, we got to think of a better term than that. I mean, I don't know because
the Pulisic signal, obviously.
Your puns and portmanteaus, my friend, they are on point this evening. I mean, I don't know. Put in Bill Hamid as like a big, tall target man. I mean, really, you look at like
loft some balls at him.
You look at the players that he maybe could have brought in, and it is like maybe Paul Arriola to give you a little bit more energy and enthusiasm. Maybe Chris Pontius, but again, he's just come in, and I don't know if you want to kind of like go with him that early.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of that, it's like Christian Roldan to like, and that is not maybe not him. But I think one thing that you and I talked about was maybe if you're trying to get that win, it does seem like Panama are maybe, especially in the final 20 minutes or so, they are very happy to sit back a bit more.
They did, right?
And get that 1-to-1
last
draw.
20 minutes they sat.
And maybe that's where you take out one of your defensive midfielders and you put on a more attack-minded player. So instead of taking out an attacker for an attacker, you take out Dax Bacardi or Kellen Acosta and you bring in an attacker.
All right, before we wrap it up, should we talk about what could have been a penalty kick, maybe? It's towards the end of the game. I think it's at the 83rd or so, because Morris ends up coming in for Alejandro Bedoya after this.
Yep.
Bedoya, it's a really nice move on the right wing, right? It's probably, apart from the Kellen Rowe move where he beats the defender to get the cross in, this is one of the only moves that a player just like has a go at a player and does something creative.
Yeah.
He does that great thing where you touch it one side, run around the other side, Alejandro Bedoya. Then, I can't remember who the defender is, the left back, right?
Yeah.
I've forgotten his name.
Maria, I believe.
No, Maria's the right back, so it's the other side. And then he tries to, like...
Ovalle,
that's it, number 17, right?
Lots of double L's.
He accelerates into the box, and then possibly, if you're being generous, gets pushed to the floor, and maybe that should have been a penalty kick. That's one version of it.
That's one version.
We slow-moed it, right?
We did. I'm going to say no penalty for a number of different reasons.
All right.
So I'm going to say, first of all... Actually, I'm going to start with the biggest one, which is that I think if you watch it in slow motion... The shove, so there is definitely a shove from Ovalle, but that happens...
Like a hand in the back, get to the floor.
But that's coming after Bedoya is already going to ground.
That's true.
He's already going to ground because there has been previous contact, but I'm going to say that contact is from Ovalle, like the kind of front side of Ovalle's right shoulder, if that makes any sense, to like the back side of Bedoya's shoulder. So you could maybe make the argument that that's like a shoulder in the back and he knocked him down. But
it's
I'm going to say
in the back of the shoulder.
But I'm going to say that's closer to shoulder for me, and they're both going for the ball.
Yeah.
And then as Bedoya is going down, you get a little bit of a shove. So maybe you could call that as like a foul for shoving.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is that shoulder to shoulder or shoulder to back contact,
or shoulder to back shoulder,
is outside the box.
It starts outside the box.
So that's the other element there, is that like, and it doesn't really continue in. The shove is kind of inside the box, but the shoulder is outside the box.
So it could have been given, but I think Panama would have felt harshly done by. If that
I think
had been given. Is that fair?
I think so. Yeah, I do wonder if this were like played in Panama, if maybe the vocal response of the fans and the intimidating atmosphere maybe makes the referee have another couple seconds of thought about it. That said, it was like 33 or 34,000 people in Tennessee.
Yeah, no,
all of
47,
whom seemed. Oh, was it? Oh, excuse me. All of whom seemed very vocal and very up for this one. So maybe he was intimidated too, but stuck to his guns.
I did notice none of the players really appealed it. When we went back and watched it, you didn't see any of the US players like arms in the air going to the ref like, come on. No one.
I'm pleased with myself because I literally have the official attendance number straight in front of me. 47,622. Oh. And yet somehow I went with 30-something because I'm smart.
Here's the other thing. Maybe Alejandro Bedoya could just be stronger. Right?
Yep.
Shoulder to shoulder, shoulder to back shoulder. He does end up going down before there's the shove, right? He was going to hit the floor.
He was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he was going to hit the floor, and then it seems like either during that sequence of play or maybe just after it, he injures himself.
Yeah.
Because then he's a little bit...
maybe he was injured on the way down or maybe in the sprint for the ball. Maybe that's why he so easily goes down.
Definitely takes his time getting back up because then the United States... basically get countered on. Panama take the ball all the way back down the field. Then the United States get the ball back and bring it all the way back down the field. And only when they're outside of Panama's box do you see Alejandro Bedoya enter the screen again.
So maybe he's subbed out soon after. And he calls for the sub. I'm sure he puts his arm in the air and asks to be subbed out. So I think he's injured.
I think
right?
I think he is.
You can stay down when you're injured.
But I think that overall, like that sequence of events, kind of really like. Is a good depiction of Alejandro Bedoya's overall evening, which is that he was the captain. I think he was the guy who was like tasked with really organizing and keeping everybody going. And I think like you could just see some of the signs of visible frustration as that game progressed of just sort of like nothing's working. We can't make this right. I'm not sure what to do. And I'm getting agitated.
The biggest one is I can't remember exactly when this is, but there's a moment when Bedoya has it like. Right of central midfield.
66th minute.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you remember watching this? Okay.
If this is what you're about to say, which I think it is.
Villafana is on the left flank and has his arms in the air, calling for the ball. Bedoya picks his head up, plays what I think is actually a really good like cross-field, like driven ball.
Yeah.
But Villafana sort of doesn't react fast enough and doesn't quite get there.
Yeah.
And when Villafana, to me, in that instance, needs like some motivation or needs a lift. It just happens that the camera goes close up on Bedoya, and he just puts his arms in the air in like a what on earth kind of thing. It just goes Jorge.
I would say he more so yells Jorge, and with his hands in the air, like, "What are you doing, man?"
Yeah.
And again, like I can understand that, like if you. Because he was clear, like you could see Villafana calling for the ball, hands in the air, and so if you're Bedoya, like you spot that, you play. I would agree with you. It's a good ball. It's a little bit like. Anticipating that Villafana is going to run into that space and Villafana is standing still. So maybe if you're a Villafana defender, you'd say like that ball should have been to feet. But I think it's the right idea from Bedoya. And I think, then to see that sort of like, I'm going to hold my hands in the air and show visible frustration, not be like, all right, man, next time. Like, let's keep it going. Again, I think it speaks to that frustration.
I wanted some positivity and motivation. I think that kind of attitude would have served the US better to see out this game than the sort of frustrating sort of downbeat stuff, right? That may be more my personality, like just prefers that. I just don't like the sort of exasperated stuff from teammates. Especially from the leader.
I don't like it either.
It's helpful.
I don't like it either, but I know that I do that too. When I just, just like those moments when it just feels like nothing is working, and I should be the one to fix this. Because I'm saying this from Bedoya's standpoint, because he is the captain and he's like this veteran leader.
Yeah.
And I can sense that frustration of like I don't know what to do. Yeah. People are making mistakes. I feel like this is my fault. I'm trying to make it better, and nothing's
Especially
working.
because like I'm doing my job, right? Because he played a perfect crossfield ball, so it's like I did my job, and then someone else didn't. So then you feel like I'm doing my role in terms of trying to drive us forward, and you're letting me down.
Perfect-ish, but yeah.
Yeah, it was a good ball. It was a good ball. I'd be proud of that ball if I hit it. Yeah.
Well, it's the difference between you and Alejandro Bedoya, I guess.
All right, so going forward, very quick chat about Martinique, who are top of the group.
Certainly are.
We play them on Wednesday evening, July 12th.
We do.
What sort of 11 would you roll out there? Would you send this same team out there and say, hey, do it better against Martinique? Or is this like maybe you give a little shock to the system and mix things up? Like, does Christian Roldan start instead of Acosta, who I think we all agree did not have a good game?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I feel like Christian Roldan, based on the fact that Martinique beat Nicaragua, and from the clips that we've seen so far, we'll try to watch a little bit more before that game. Mm-hmm. But based on the clips we've seen, it was a pretty rough, pretty physical game, and there wasn't so much technical ability on display. So I feel like this is a game where...
There's that one turn for the second goal.
There's that. And that's from Martinique, is my point.
Yeah,
so I guess what I'm saying is, like, I feel like you kind of stick with your stronger-ish team.
Yeah.
And then maybe once you've got those 4 points, you can maybe relax a little bit more against Nicaragua.
Okay.
And maybe that's where you'll see some of those newer faces or faces we haven't yet seen get some playing time. In this second game, I wouldn't be surprised if he makes a couple changes to kind of freshen things up.
Yeah.
Maybe he does. I think you suggested maybe he gives Dex McCarty a little bit of a break.
Well, my idea there was, so instead of having McCarty be the main guy in midfield and Acosta like the sort of second in command, bring Roldan in and make Acosta the main guy. And it's almost like after a bad performance, you just challenge him to do better, give him more responsibility and make him step up.
All right, I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that. I'm looking at the roster now, just trying to think what else might happen. Again,
Paul Arriola might happen.
I think so, and I think so especially because, as I said before, we heard Bruce Arena audibly screaming at Kellen Rowe. And I do wonder if maybe that's a thing where it's sort of like, yeah, you had the assist, but you made some mistakes. You're going to sit this game. We'll see what you do in the third. Which all of this is to say that I kind of don't know what he's going to do. Because we might see 1 or 2 changes. We might see him change it up completely. But I just...
Matt Hedges, Matt Miazga.
You know what? I am going to say this. I'm going to say we're going to see a roughly similar team. Because, again, his goal here is to figure out who can help him in 2018. Okay. And it doesn't really make sense to just throw everything out, try a whole new lineup, and just see what else might fit. We want to see that kind of like natural progression. So I do think, maybe it is Hedges comes back in for Omar. Like, that is a natural progression. This didn't really work so well. Let's go back to Beasler and Hedges, see if that fixes things. Maybe we, bring in Arriola because that seemed like it was okay against Ghana. We'll see if that works again.
What about Graham Zusi? Does he play or does Eric Lehigh play? Everyone's itching to see Eric Lehigh. This wasn't a good defensive performance from Graham Zusi. We talked about how he was kind of at fault for the goal because Torres cut across him too easily. He also let them cut inside and shoot too many times. I feel like this is the chance to maybe say, hey, Graham Zusi, even go play right wing, but maybe we give Lehigh a start at right back here.
I would like to see Lehigh just because I would like to see Lehigh. I think
Arena... confirm he's there?
I think Arena sticks with Zusi. And that's only because it just seems like Zusi... Maybe he's like the most likable locker room guy in the world, but it seems like he really endears himself to his coaches, both at club and national team level. So I feel like he kind of retains that spot. If for no other reason, because Arena wants to kind of see what else fits elsewhere and doesn't want to change too much. Yeah. And also maybe he just wants to continue to see how Zusi does with greater and greater expectations.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, so we are like 57 minutes in or so. I think we've said all there is to say about USA Panama.
I would say so.
I would say more than most people expected to hear.
I would say so.
Okay, so no other business before we shut this down.
Other than, yes, one little piece, because we've only talked about him in bits and pieces, but I do think... it's a 1-1, so he doesn't keep the clean sheet. But I think Brad Guzan had about as good of a game as he could have had.
Yeah.
He made some good reaction saves. He made some good position-based saves where he was in the right spot at the right time. And so I think overall it's it's the most you can hope for from a goalkeeper in that situation.
Okay, I'd still like to add a face tattoo. But
again, no argument. Or the Howard the Duck podcast, or just something random. We need a little bit more of like, oh, all right, he's a little bit crazy. I like this.
Could we close on a happy note?
Sure.
Ruben Neves has signed for Wolves.
Yeah.
Romelu Lukaku appears to be about to sign for Manchester United.
And got, apparently, as of time of recording, got a speeding ticket for a 55 and a 45, which is his second citation from the Beverly Hills Police in 2 days.
What's he doing in Beverly Hills?
Yeah, just hanging out with Paul Pogba. Summering with Paul Pogba, making Instagram videos. Hopefully getting in shape.
Mkhitaryan was not. All right, that's a whole different topic. We'll be back on Monday. I'm planning an interview with someone who knows a little something about Martinique. So we might get a bit more insight into the Martinique team ahead of Wednesday's game. Turns out we were a bit more worried about that game now than before, right? Just because we need the points and because they're top of the group.
Yeah.
Also, Monday, we have planned a Game of Thrones 11 show. We have it planned for about a week before the show comes back.
So many characters.
Right? Too many characters.
Look, I'm just going to say this now. I know we're going to get a whole bunch of how did you not include this person? How did you not include this person? Because there are 7 million characters. That's why. That's why.
Okay. I like that you're angry in advance before we've even got those messages.
I just know it's coming. We got when we did like I'm trying to think of what's the last one we did.
Twitter is coming.
We did Parks and Rec, and we got like
joke.
what about this guy? Yeah, I'm not letting no more of your comments. Like with Parks and Rec, we got like what about this character who appeared in half an episode in season 2?
Yeah.
And it's like come on, man. And Game of Thrones, there are like I'm going to say hundreds of characters to choose from, and we have to choose 11.
Yep.
It's going to be rough. Maybe we should do a draft for this one where we should just, like, once you pick a person, I can't pick that person. I changed my mind. I don't want to do that. Never mind.
But that show is going to be out late Monday evening. Until then, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about USA Panama.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you. If you've listened to the end, thank you for listening to an hour on USA Panama. We hope we made it worth your while, and we'll be back on Monday again.
Buttmegged.